Welcome, everybody, to the Ephrom Josine Show for April 25th, 2018. I'm your host, Ephrom Josine. Sorry I had to use the webcam today, but work with what we got. Our first story concerns radio talk show host and creator of the YouTube channel that he thinks is a university, Dennis Prager. Dennis recently released a book called The Rational Bible. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but bear with me. That has appeared on the bestseller lists for Amazon, Wall Street Journal, and Publishers Weekly, however, not the New York Times. What Dennis did not mention, mind you, is it only appears as a bestseller on Amazon under the category of Old Testament religious study, which, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't a very competitive category last time I checked. But okay, we'll bear with it. Maybe the book really is popular in other categories and the New York Times just isn't covering it. As such, I find it odd that according to PragerU's own page on Dennis, he has written New York Times bestsellers in the past. Quote, his New York Times best-selling books include Think a Second Time, Happiness is a Serious Problem, and Still the Best Hope, Why American Values Must Triumph. So Dennis Prager is being so discriminated against by the New York Times that the New York Times has put his books on the bestseller list in the past. But it can't just be that his book isn't doing all that well, and that, I don't know, maybe the fact that, for instance, the Wall Street Journal is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox News and several other pieces of right-wing media, are therefore more likely to promote that book, and not what Dennis seems to think, and just the New York Times is specifically not talking about his book. It can't be that. Everything is the fault of leftists, don't you know? When someone accused the PragerU Twitter account of just doing Dennis's dirty work, for the PragerU account then said, quote, we chose to cover this with no input from Dennis whatsoever. So, let me get this straight. PragerU refused to cover, didn't need the permission of Dennis Prager, or did not work with Dennis Prager to cover something that that showed how the media is just so mean and is bullying poor Dennis Prager. Dennis, we both know that's a lie. We both know that's a lie. That's completely, if that's not a lie, it's at the very least very suspicious. At the very least, they had some reason to cover it, mainly because they're named after Dennis Prager. But I think this all confirms one thing, and it's the same thing I confirmed when Dennis tried to sue Google. And that is, Dennis Prager is, simply put it, one of the biggest snowflakes out there. He thinks that he has the right to have his books covered as bestsellers, even when they are simply not. Dennis's books are just not popular enough to get on a New York Times bestseller list, when they have been before, and he can't think of maybe people don't want to read The Rational Bible by Dennis Prager, and instead it's because the whole media is conspiring to take him down. On to our next story. Steven Crowder is one of the leading conservatives in the facts don't care about your feelings movement, which is odd because he hired someone named Courtney Kristoff. I think it's Krischoff, in order to write a op-ed essentially saying that over at Louder with Crowder, called Dear Compassionate Leftists, your complicit silence on Alfie Evans is deafening. If you do not know what happened, the UK government pulled a child with severe brain damage named Alfie Evans off of life support, as opposed to in the United States where he'd be denied coverage due to a pre-existing condition and then die. Reminder, Crowder is against the Affordable Care Act. um, Now, before we look into this piece that could be best described as an appeal to emotions fallacy, just repeated over and over again, I figured I should give you some facts. While Crowder can point to this one story of single-payer healthcare supposedly killing someone, I can still point to a Harvard study that says that 45,000 people die a year due to lack of healthcare. So let me get this straight. By your own numbers, Stephen, my preferred system causes 45,000 times less suffering to happen, but I should just drop my support for that because look at this one example. Let's see, that's still a difference of 44,999. Okay, these are basic numbers. And believe it or not, basic numbers are not part of a leftist conspiracy. Now, let's actually look at some of the things he said, or specifically the writer, Courtney, says about this story in this article. Quote, Italy has sent aid in efforts to take this child off your country's statist hands. She's referring to the UK, revealing the NHS of Alfay's financial burden, or relieving. Wouldn't want a little one like Alfay taking any more of his fair share of the NHS's limited resources. Now, what Courtney didn't seem to realize when she wrote this article is that Italy also has universal health care. In Italy, healthcare is downright considered a right, and as such, their national healthcare plan provides for all Italian citizens. So a person in a country with universal healthcare was nearly saved by another country with universal healthcare. Look, if you want to use this as a way to talk about the morality of the UK government, that is perfectly fine. I'm willing to have that discussion with you, and I probably would lean towards Crowder's side on that issue. Mainly being it is extremely immoral, especially when another country is downright offering to pay for it. However, if you are using this as proof that a single-payer healthcare system is bad, you simply don't understand facts, can't look at the bigger picture, or don't even understand the story you're using as an example. This very simple part of the story, that being the healthcare system of Italy, being the exact same concept as the healthcare system in the United Kingdom. If anything, it appears to be more socialized because Italy is allowing people outside their country to receive help now. Kind of disproves Crowder's claim. In fact, if we were to actually follow Crowder's logic of correlation always equals causation, then we should be even more in favor of single payer. Because, again, his medicine is just so socialized that even people who do not live in Italy get their health care for free because of that. At least in this one scenario. I would now like to read you the final couple paragraphs of the article. Just while I'm reading this, keep in mind, by the way, the country they're praising has the exact same healthcare system as the country they hate. Leftists in both the UK and the USA are silent about Alfie Evans because they approve. If the government funds the health care of its citizenry, does not the government get to decide when to stop funding its citizenry? We both know if you replace government with insurance agency, they just agree with that and consider it a duh, by the way. The power and influence of the state must be protected at all cost. Alfie Evans is but another sacrifice to the altar of the state, as Stephen Crowder so adequately put it, and that's why I essentially circle this all back to Crowder, because he approved of this. He knew what this article said. Alfie Evans is yet another sacrifice at the altar of the state. That's how socialism has to end. which again is why another socialist country is offering to foot the bill. But he's right. The collective comes before the individual. Alfie must be sacrificed for the cause of government. His parents have no right to protect or seek better care of their child. Only the almighty government can decide what's best for the government's child. Your continued silence on his treatment only bolsters my belief you approve of it. The status... Well, your continued silence of the other 44,999 people that die in this country in privatized healthcare USA due to a lack of basic access to healthcare shows me that you approve of that then. If we're doing that, if you support a system and every single bad thing that happens under that system is therefore the fault of you, well then you're going to get it about 45,000 times worse than I am, is all I'm saying. The state has ruled Alfie is terminal, therefore Alfie is terminal. His parents' wishes matter not once the court has failed to rule against Alfie's life. So what if one child dies? At least the NHS and your socialist stronghold remain firmly in place. As opposed to the Italian socialist stronghold that you just praised not too long ago, to continue wielding its power over the peasants of the United Kingdom, who just cannot care for themselves. Bless those poor little serfs. So if you would, spare the rest of the world your child lectures whenever a child dies tragically. Spare us of your public relations approved grief. Spare us your tear-filled tweets. Your government is killing sick children with full consent. And you did anything to stop it. It actually stops with, and you did anything to stop it. So we did something to stop it, apparently, which contradicts the whole point of this article. But okay. So yeah. That was all just nonsense and lies. That's how I describe pretty much anything Steven Crowder writes. Nonsense and lies. And this other person, Courtney Christoph, is simply just hired by Crowder more than likely. It all circles back to him. Because this is his website, mind you. But, that's it. I'm Ephrom, and good night.